Welcome back to hour two of Nothing Personal. Today is Thursday, September 4th, 2025. We are 1 minute closer to the start of the NFL season. And you know what Thursday means? We have a guest for you, and we're lucky. Someone I used to work with at CBS now is a Fox NFL and college analyst, the perfect person to talk about everything that's happening. Brady Quinn. How are you, Brady?
I'm doing great, David. Thanks for having me, man. Obviously, good time to kind of talk some football with you, but a long time no see, so I'm glad we get to connect.
No, this is terrific. It was always fun doing shows with you. And I've been thinking about you and watching you on the air and thinking about some of the craziness that is surrounding that started with the big noon kickoff and you. And just I was picturing you as all the shrapnel was flying by your head, trying to say, hey, man, we have a season to talk about, not who's allowed where, inside what university. What's your reaction as you're heading into, week one and you're starting a show and all of a sudden there's distractions everywhere?
Well, I think when you do TV long enough, you realize there's always distractions, there's technical issues, there's things that change last minute. I mean, I remember we were in East Lansing for Michigan State one year, and Calvin Johnson was going to come on the show. He got stuck up in traffic, and so for about 30 minutes of the show, we were constantly like on standby for Calvin Johnson joining the show. And he finally got there eventually, but you kind of had to manage it on live television. Like at any point in time, you're trying to segue off of whatever you're talking about just to bring in a guy who at that point wasn't in the Hall of Fame, but you knew was going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And so that's TV. Like you get used to those sorts of things. It seems like in today's society, and I think you'd agree with this, what tends to draw the most reaction and the most attention tends to get the most views. And that's what things are about. So it's never surprising to me when we're a part of some stuff that has some drama that surrounds it.
The story of it should have been Arch Manning. And, the odds moved for him after that performance, after their loss to Ohio State, who's now the new number one in the most recent AP poll, is that he went from like plus 650 to plus 1600 at the time for Heisman. When you're watching that game and you're watching his performance, are you reevaluating your evaluation of Arch Manning based on that game?
I'm not, because it's funny, like all the hype, it wasn't like he had never started before and it came out of nowhere. I mean, granted, it was versus Louisiana Monroe or Mississippi State, but even the times he came in, whether it was during the playoff or other points in time in the season, he played well and he showcased the arm strength, he showcased the athleticism, all the things that you'd be looking for. I just give a lot of credit to Ohio State. And I said this at one point, after the game, is think about how hard it is to prepare for 8 new starters on that side of the ball and a defensive coordinator that, you're watching his NFL tape. You don't know what types of coverages, blitzes, fronts, adjustments they're going to make throughout the course of the game. The Ohio State offensive staff can just go back and look at exactly what happened in the semifinal game last season, because that's roughly the same characters that you've got on that side of the ball for Texas and the same defensive coordinator, Pete Kwiatkowski. So it's a much easier game plan for the Ohio State side than it was, I think, for Texas, at least for their offense in that regard. So I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just trying to provide some details into what goes into all of this. And one of the reasons why I think Ohio State was so successful, I mean, it's in part that, but also they have a damn good defense. I mean, that group, when I went back and watched the film, there weren't many open throws. Now, there were a few that Arch Manning flat out missed, and that's on him. He's got to be better than that. He knows that. But there was a lot of times where every single thing was contested, and he had to throw a perfect throw. And on the touchdown, it was a pretty darn good throw. On the one up the sideline to the tight end, towards the end of the game was a really good throw. You saw instances of it, but I thought Ohio State made him feel uncomfortable. They didn't try to allow him to flush outside the pocket. A lot of young quarterbacks like to do that because A, they can see, and if they see, they feel much more confident where they're throwing the football. But B, he's athletic and he can hurt you with his legs. And when you take away his ability to see and you take away his ability to run, it makes most quarterbacks feel like I'm trapped. I'm in a house that's burning down and I can't get out. That's how he looked on the field to me. He never had a rhythm. He didn't look confident. It didn't look like he could see, and everything was moving really fast for him because he was trying to catch up because of the disguise of the Ohio State defense.
So that's a very big point in that for professional athletes, we talk to them often about slow the game down. And some players can do it and some players can't. And when you cannot slow the game down, you're going to be not successful. I was reading Brady yesterday that backup quarterbacks are potentially making like $500,000 in NIL money. And how much money? I know you're smiling because can you imagine? Can you imagine your worth right now? You're like looking back and saying, are you kidding me? Like I would have made more than Arch, but I'm thinking about all this NIL money. And we used to sort of think about college football. Hey, you've got Alabama, and they're always going to be there. And then Nick Saban sort of disappears, saying, I don't know if I like how it is. I don't know if there can be the separation that I'm used to. When you look at the landscape, do you agree that it's actually hard now to think about who can separate themselves from a college program standpoint?
Yeah, I think there's elements that allow it to be somewhat of a level playing field. I don't like the fact that they've allowed collectives to remain. I really thought they were going to try to find a way of eliminating it so there would be a quasi salary cap. But it doesn't feel like that's going to be the case. They're going to have the House NCAA settlement revenue to share with the student athletes. There's no mandate on every school and how they're going to go about spending it, so that could create some inequities. But also the fact that collectives will still be able to exist. And yes, they have the College Sports Commission, the CSC, but I don't really know what power they have to negate any of these deals or deem them, not, market value and falling under the guidelines they're providing because there's no collective bargaining agreement. There's no union from the player side. So any gripe that a student athlete has or a player has with the College Sports Commission shutting down one of those deals from a collective, they're going to just take to the courts and they're probably going to win.
I love the idea of the College Sports Commission looking at a local car dealership and saying, well, wait a minute, that should only be 200 grand,
right,
not 275 grand. It's almost laughable.
It really is, and it's kind of precedent setting in a way, but it's also fascinating to see how this is going to play out from a legal perspective. But because of the House, NCAA settlement, there's this idea that there should be somewhat of a level playing field, but there's not because of the collectives. And so I think the hard thing is there's programs obviously who aren't going to have as much funds to be able to put into that, and they're going to fall by the wayside. But there's also those teams that aren't going to spend wisely. I mean, Texas A&M was the case study for that. They've been a program that, when NIL first came about, they spent more than anyone, and it wasn't spent in the right places. And the culture of that team and that program kind of fell to the wayside. And so now you've got Mike Elko there who's back trying to build it back up and do it the right way. But I think when you look at what's happened at Alabama, culture to me is fragile. And honestly, it's more player-led than I think it is coach-led. But I think what happens is when you have a coach like Nick Saban who leaves, if you don't have strong enough leaders, upperclassmen, veteran players in that locker room, a lot of the small things start to be overlooked, especially if the head coach doesn't hold those players accountable. And then those players don't hold each other accountable. So when I go back and I look at the tape of Alabama, I see a lack of effort. I see a lack of technique and a lack of them doing their job and holding their leverage, for example, on defense, if they're in pass coverage or filling the right gap the way they're supposed to. There's all these little breakdowns. Those little things, add up. And that was something that Nick Saban would never allow in his program, or at least he would chew guys out and they wouldn't be playing if they were going on. And it feels like under Kalen DeBoer that someone's taken their thumb off of those players and the program feels just more lax at this moment.
Would you have thought that if they had won? It's just funny how how we all look at things. And sometimes we look at the results and sometimes we look at the process. But I've always had this feeling that when a team like Alabama goes in and all of a sudden, like the world is crumbling. Should we fire the coach? What, is he going to last? Like it's literally a tragedy when the loss happens. You look at that team. Do you see this as basically how this season will play out for them? Or do you think because of the way you said it, hey, no, this is who they are, and it really wasn't that big an upset to begin with?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt the odds makers had that wrong. I mean, clearly Florida State's a much better football team with Tommy Castellanos as the quarterback, and you saw how effective he is running the football. Gus Malzahn's a genius. He's an offensive genius. So, he's going to put defenses and their coordinators and blenders as far as the things he's going to do offensively. That was always going to be a challenge for them. I think my concern was the lack of effort. I mean, that's your opening game of the season. There shouldn't be any need to be able to get that team up or to get that team excited, whether it's the leaders or the back end guys in the roster. And so to not have that sort of effort, not have the sort of conditioning you need, it's definitely concerning. And I think, look, this is the opportunity for Alabama. You make your biggest strides from week 1 to week 2, because in college football, there's no preseason. It's really hard to gauge where you're at until you go out there and play. And for those teams that chose to play a tough team, a tough opponent like Alabama did versus Florida State, you've got to be able to make those corrections, make those adjustments, and then be able to put the right guys in there in the right spots to succeed. So I think they've got a great opportunity to respond and listen to everything that's being said about them in the media, and be the team that I thought they were going to be coming into the season, where they would be able to win games defensively, running the football. Ty Simpson would be able to kind of come along doing his part. He's a talented passer, but he's unproven. I really thought they would show more dominance in the trenches. It just was not there. So this is their opportunity to respond, and we'll see how they handle it. Because if not, I know it's a big buyout for Kalen DeBoer, but you have to be concerned, considering the track record of success that this the Alabama fan base is accustomed to, and if they're not going to be calling for his head.
You think that one more loss and they would fire him?
I don't think after one more loss, but I'm saying if you lose one more, I mean, you were a 9-3 football team last year and you didn't make it in. You start off 0-2, like where does that leave you? So, but I think if they don't make the playoff again, 2 years in a row not making it after the run of success that you had under Nick Saban, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of fans calling for that, clamoring for that, not wanting to go back to the Alabama football era before Nick Saban got there.
What a tough customer you are and the fans are. And I guess that tonight we see the road to Santa Clara starts. Always a big day on the calendar as the NFL season kicks off. And of course, it makes perfect sense that it's the Cowboys and the Eagles, because the Cowboys, as usual, dominate the offseason headlines with Micah Parsons not obviously suiting up for the Cowboys. But isn't more pressure on Jalen Hurts and the Eagles as they try to repeat? Or do you think that the Cowboys, who are not really, their over-under is quite low, like 7.5, not to make the playoffs. Where do you see tonight's game?
I see the pressure more on Dallas and Jerry Jones. I think he's put himself in this position. He's traded away your best player on your team to get Kenny Clark and 2 first-round picks and still be able to act like you're able to be in the hunt when you have a Washington team in your own division that, took big strides, and you have a Giants team that I think it's going to be improved in your division. So I know they feel like they're better against the run. We're going to find out. I mean, when I was a Philly runs for over 200 yards on you week 1, after all your comments, how the trade's going to help you be better at stopping the run, and your defense isn't improved, and the head coach isn't managing the game well. And he's the guy that you opted to go with, as opposed to extending Mike McCarthy, who's won a Super Bowl and has coached a lot of good teams in this league. I mean, every single thing that they've done this offseason, or haven't done for that matter, is going to be on display, I think, for Dallas. And obviously Jerry Jones doesn't mind that. He likes being in the spotlight. Hell, he's playing himself in Landman. There's all these things going on, but I don't think it makes them a good football team. So I think where we should be talking about Philly more is Philly the team. We were talking about it with Kansas City because they had won back-to-back Super Bowls, but is Philly that team that maybe we should talk about more in regards to being able to win back-to-back and maybe be able to three-peat? I mean, their roster is as good as anyone in the NFL. They've got arguably the best offensive line. They have a quarterback who seems to constantly show up and show out on the biggest stage. They have the best player in the NFL, according to the NFL Top 100, and their players in Saquon Barkley. The receivers are studs. The defense reloaded. I mean, I look at this team and I sit there and say, what do they don't have? I mean, all they need to do is remain healthy and to continue to build off of what they were able to do last year. So, but I don't think there's more pressure on them necessarily to do so. I think if anything, it's more about, figuring out what the identity of this year's team's going to be, even though there's so many guys coming back, and how they can get back to the top of the mountain again.
Do you need your identity when you're trying to win a second Super Bowl in a row? Don't you want the same identity? Don't you want to just keep rolling as though it's one long 34-game season?
Well, I think you're the type of man, Dave, that zigs when other people zag. And so I think you would agree. You always have to be growing, evolving, and adapting. And whatever you were last year in the NFL, you can't be this year. And so if that was your identity last year, teams are studying for you, because they, especially your divisional opponents, because they had to play you a couple times. So they're going to have wrinkles for you. They're going to have adjustments for whatever was effective last year. So you always have to be growing and changing. And so I don't think you can keep your identity the same. I think there's elements of it. And I think ultimately where you want to get to, winning a Super Bowl, repeating, and how you're going to do it with some of those foundational things like, accountability and working hard and the way you go about trying to get the ball to your playmakers and having luck. Like, let's be real. The best teams that win championships, there's always a little bit of luck along the way. The injury bug tends to not bite them quite as bad, or if it does, they happen to have a backup that can come in and play. I mean, I look at, for example, Howie Roseman. They have Tanner McKee, who played phenomenal in the preseason. He looks like he can step in and do it, but in case he can't, they got Sam Howell, a guy who's got starting experience, and he could come in and do the job. So even just the way they go about in Philly, building their roster to absorb the potential for an injury. And no one knows it better than them because they've won a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback in Nick Foles. But just the importance of having that sort of depth on a roster to make a run. So I kind of look at it and just say, there's elements of this team that are going to be the same, but their identity can't be the same because every year it's different. You have to adapt and grow and go from there.
So if you are the Eagles, wouldn't it be interesting if Saquon is actually not their number one option tonight? Because in theory, the trade was to help stop the run. You bring in Clark and you have Jerry Jones, the GM. I can't remember if the GM said it or the owner. One of the Jerry Joneses said it, that, hey, we believe that our real problem was stopping the run. I think they said it 50 times during the press conference. So maybe what they do is have Saquon as the option or have him out as almost as a receiver. Is that something that you think that they can out-coach the Cowboys because of the new staff, and that gives the Eagles an even bigger advantage tonight?
Well, I think Kevin Patullo, who will be calling the plays now, will have some wrinkles. I mean, they're preparing for a guy that they really don't know his identity as a play caller. And there are elements there for Jalen Hurts. Like, he's got to kind of feel that out. You can do it in preseason or you can do it in training camp, but until you get into real live games where, you go into it and there's adjustments that are made, then the next series you're adjusting again, you don't know how that play caller is going to handle it. Some guys are really, really good at preparing you. Like, the game plan on paper looks great. Then you get in the game and they don't know how to pull the trigger. Like, they don't know how to actually call the shot when you need to call the shot, anticipate what's going to happen next, have kind of a feel for, the flow of the game, how it's going, whether you need to, speed it up or slow it down. There's an art to that. I've been with guys who are great play callers, and I've been with guys who are great game planners, but they can't call it once they get into it. And I think some of my best games.
Who is your best?
Charlie Weiss had an unbelievable knack for doing that. He was obviously my coordinator in college, but you go back to just his NFL days, winning 3 Super Bowls with the Patriots. He was one that stood out to me. I had a guy named Rob Chazinski who was with us in Cleveland. Chud could find these different looks on film, game planning. And I was like, man, this is nuts. This is like 2 years ago, using this personnel grouping in this situation, in this formation, or how they shifted motion to get to it. And sure as hell, man, you get into the game and they would be the exact same look. And it was just nuts how coordinators carry their same adjustments within their defense from team to team. Sometimes it'd be like a different team the coordinator was with, and it would still play out that way. So Rob Chazinski was another one that, man, when he got hot, he could dial it up. Mike McCoy, Adam Gase, those guys, they could really adapt to when I was in Denver, whether it was Kyle Orton or Tim Tebow, and putting in an offense that was dramatically different and being able to change and pivot in season to be able to make it kind of work for both guys to the best of their ability. So I've been fortunate enough to be around some guys who definitely can call some plays. Josh McDaniels as a head coach, it didn't work out in Denver when I was with him, but I can tell you this much. As a quarterback, you loved him. He gave you so much power at the line of scrimmage. You knew if you were going to have 10 pass attempts, you're going to throw for at least 100 yards because he was able to space the field in a way where you could get guys catch and run, balls and easy matchups, whether it's zone coverage or man-to-man coverage, to go find those weaknesses within the defense. So that's just a few of them. But, obviously Josh still calling plays. Charlie Weiss Jr. now is a baller calling plays.
Oh, God. Do you feel old? How old do you feel that you just said that?
Well, what made me feel the oldest this year was, we taped some of our segments for our Big Noon Kickoff show during the Big Ten Media Days. And the quarterback, Devon Williams Jr., out in Washington, walks in and he goes, "Hey, man, you played against my dad." And I would go, "Oh." I just started to cringe right away because I was like, "Oh, all right, where?" He goes, "He was a cornerback at Michigan State." He goes, "You threw a touchdown pass against the corner of the end zone." I go, "To Raymond McKnight, number 5. He goes, "Yeah, that was him." And so I kind of like dapped him up and we did the rest of the interview, but he left. And I was thinking to myself, like, damn, like I've officially graduated into the, like, I am old. Like, I'm a dad of five, so I feel that way, but that made me feel about as old as I can feel at this point.
It's always a tough one when the Suns start playing. I've had it obviously happen. I want to switch to the AFC a little bit, and it's the schedule makers, bless their heart. I know obviously how hard it is to put a schedule together, but the NFL has quite a week one, and I believe it's the Sunday night game when we're going to have the Ravens and the Bills play. So one of Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen is going to be 0-1, and it won't be panic because they're the two best players I think in the league with Saquon, let's say. But tell me, who's got more pressure to finally make a Super Bowl? Is it Allen or is it Jackson?
Oh, I think it's Lamar Jackson. And I think it's close. But the reason I'm going to lean more on Lamar is because I think he relies more on his legs still than he does his arm. Even though they both run a decent amount, I still think that's a bigger part of Lamar Jackson's game. And I think over time, that's going to slow down. You still continue to worry about the injury concerns as he gets older too. And well, that's the same for Josh Allen, but he doesn't
Right.
do
He
it
uses
quite
his
as much.
body. Josh Allen, right? He uses his big body in a way that maybe now that he's married and getting older, he's like, wait a minute, this hurts way too much.
Well, I would just say this. I think Josh Allen's game starts in the pocket and he utilizes his legs when it's there. For Lamar Jackson, I think he's like a true dual threat. Like he can no doubt throw from the pocket and win an MVP doing that, but he also is dynamic with his legs. And so because he's so special at both, not that he relies on it, but there's definitely times where I feel like he resorts to that maybe more so than Josh does. And I'll put it this way, like I feel like eventually as both get older, both are going to move away from that and they're going to use that sparingly. But I think it's still a little bit bigger piece of Lamar's game than it is in Josh Allen's at this point. So I think for that reason, as that window starts to close on those guys as they get older and they can't run quite or move quite as well, that becomes more detrimental to them. So I look at I look at that division too. It's always going to be a tough division. I think when you've got the window at the roster built out around you in the AFC North, you have to seize that opportunity. Like I look at Cincinnati right now, they're going to have Trey Hendrickson for 1 year, and they're going to have Higgins and Chase together, and they're going to make another run at it this year. But I would imagine Hendrickson will not be there after this year based on the deal they signed. I don't know if Shamar Stewart will be able to fill that void. Who knows how long Higgins will be there. And then it becomes a question of like, will Cincinnati be able to continue to keep putting pieces around Joe Burrow? Or is that window going to eventually close? So, you have all those questions for different teams in the division, but I just think it's such a competitive division year in and year out. The Steelers are like always a constant. That I feel like that window is so tight in the AFC North to be able to seize that opportunity where you got the Jets in the AFC East. They seem to struggle with things. I'm not sure what to expect out of the Dolphins this year. I do think the Pats are building to something. I think they'll end up being second in the AFC East this year. But I just think that the division of the AFC East, I mean, we saw New England dominate it forever. I think Buffalo's going to be able to have their time to make a run in the AFC East for a while.
So we've covered the AFC, we've covered the NFC. Now let's cover the Super Bowl. The road starts tonight. Make no mistake, and it ends in Santa Clara. We got in our remaining time, and it's not a lot of it. Who do you see playing in the Super Bowl?
Obviously, I was there for a
spot.
year. I was there for a year. I love the Chiefs. You didn't put Patrick Mahomes with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, Saquon as far as the best players. I still think Patrick
You're
Mahomes
right.
is just a stud. I really do. So I'm going to say Kansas City. That combination they have between Mahomes and Reed and even Kelsey, who's not what he once was, but yeah, I think with some of the pieces they have there, it's hard to pick against them. And so I'll go with Kansas City. I think on the NFC side, the roster's so good. I want to pick Philly. Green Bay, though, I'll say Kansas City versus Green Bay. They're going to have Parsons now. That's a roster that I think also is built to create havoc on defense. They've got playmakers that are young and have emerged. I think Jordan Love, too, is continually built into his own. And so I'll say Kansas City, Green Bay. And I feel bad about this because I usually do. I will pick every single game of the season and then I'll, kind of pair it all together and all that. So now for my radio show, I'm gonna have to make sure I pick Kansas City, Green Bay, even though I haven't gone through the schedule for every team yet.
The ultimate irony of Jerry Jones handing an NFC championship to Green Bay would be an absolute chef's kiss of brilliance in
Right?
terms of the Cowboys. But Brady, we could keep going. I wish we could. Good luck this season. Make sure you watch Brady Quinn on wait, are you working every day now? The big noon kickoff, that's at 10
Yeah.
a.m. You're an NFL analyst, all on Fox. Brady Quinn, you have a radio show. You're everywhere. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, David. Always good talking with you.